Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Aisha, your host. Are there Muslims that support the idea that evolution and Islamic beliefs can coexist in harmony with one another? If the answer is yes, then how does this approach work? As usual, let's get our expert's thought on this matter, Dr. Shabir Ally. Welcome to the show, Dr. Shabir.
Pleasure to be on.
So we're talking about understanding Muslim perspectives now about biological evolution. So let's begin with Dr. Maurice's book as your first one. So tell me about a little bit about the author. Let's start with that.
Dr. Maurice Bucaille, whose book I now hold, entitled "What is the Origin of Man," has caught a lot of attention among Muslims with his previous book to this one, the book entitled "The Bible, the Quran, and Science." And in fact, now there is a term Bucailleism, which refers to the fact that Maurice Bucaille has created a wave of excitement among Muslims in which Muslims are interested in seeing the comparison between science and our sacred text, the Quran. Because in that book, The Bible, the Quran, and Science, Bucaille established that there are many statements in the Quran that touch upon physical phenomena, and in no case is the Quranic statement mistaken. And this is remarkable because you would expect that a book that is written some 1400 years ago and touching upon all of these various aspects of physical reality would make mistakes. And even science textbooks need to be updated and revised. But yet the Quran, while having said something in a very simple manner so that the message could be understood by people in the 7th century, at the same time the Quranic language is such that when a modern scientist looks at the way things are spoken about in the Quran, the modern scientists feel as well, yeah, this is right at home with what we know now from science. So that caught a lot of attention among Muslims, and now the term Bucailleism, the approach to reconciling the Quran and science in that particular way. Now this book is lesser known, but it is out there, and in fact this is an old one published in 1983, and it's now falling apart. My copy is anyway.
Is it getting attention now when you said with the terminology, or has it been getting attention and you're saying now
this particular book has not gained that much attention as his previous book, The Bible, the Quran, and Science.
Okay.
And it could be because this book is very technical. It deals with the details of the theory of evolution. It cites important scholars, but because the book was originally written in French, that's another issue. It's quoting scholars who are not so relevant to the English-speaking world, because of course, I mean, these are important scholars in their own right, but when English readers are thinking of the important scholars in this field, they are scholars who are actually published in the English language. So these are some of the drawbacks that perhaps have led to this book being less noticed than his previous book. The other issue may be that the theory of evolution on the whole has proved to be very complex for believers, and people would rather just simply think of the simple way in which we have conceived of the origin of created things and animals and humans. And this has been kind of, it's a topic that is not so much discussed among Muslims to begin with.
So how does are there any key points that sort of stood out to you in terms of what he raises about evolution and its link to the Quran or religious beliefs for that matter?
Yes. Well, to begin with, he embraces the term creative evolution, but he uses it in the sense that as organisms evolve, they have to evolve at the genetic level. And that involves a kind of creativity, as if there is some creativity without attributing it to God initially. There has to be an increase in information in the genes. So we go from one generation to another, there is a slight increase in change. So that's what he refers to as creative evolution. But of course, we have used it in the sense that God intervenes and creates. God is using evolution as his method of creating. So it is creation and evolution together. So he's not far from that, but he's starting with this kind of neutral perspective so that he does not jump the gun and assume the very thing which he's trying to eventually show. And of course, in the end, what he does show is that the Quran has many passages which are in some ways indicative of evolution, and in any case, the Quranic presentation of the development of life on Earth is compatible with the theory of evolution.
And is he, just out of curiosity, is he Muslim himself, or he's just done a lot of research in religious scriptures?
This has never become clear to me. From the manner in which he writes and the things that he proves, you would expect, well, okay, this means that the man is a Muslim. But I haven't found a statement of his explicitly declaring, I am now a Muslim. But what he does describe in his books is that he had a Christian sort of background, and he eventually became curious about the Quran because he heard so many things about the Quran. And then as a scientist, when he came to realize that there are certain statements in the Quran which touch upon physical reality, he became curious to know more about the original statements in the Quran in its original language, because so much is lost in translation. And he therefore studied the Arabic language in order to understand the Quran at this depth. And when he did that, he saw that often if you go back to the original meaning of, like linguistically, what the Quranic statement could imply, he finds that these statements are quite compatible with modern knowledge, whereas translations that exist in French and even in English and common notions about what the Quran actually teaches may be based on a misunderstanding, and he finds that the understanding of science on the one hand and the understanding of the language of the Quran on the other hand can bring the two together.
I think that's very helpful and sort of illustrates the point very clearly. I know you had mentioned another book that you wanted to talk about within this context, and that was Dr. Mustafa Mahmoud's book, Understanding the Quran. So tell us a little bit about that book.
Yes, that book, unfortunately, I don't have a copy of that,
okay.
Otherwise I'd hold it up for our viewers. But Dr. Mustafa Mahmoud has written a number of books, and his most famous one among Muslims, in my view, is the one entitled Al-Hiwar Ma Sadiq al-Mulhid, the dialogue with my atheist friend. In that book, he goes through a number of arguments in which he demonstrates the validity of belief in God vis-a-vis atheism. Now, in another book, Understanding the Quran, he's not dealing with evolution as the only subject. He's dealing with the Quran on the whole and how do we understand this book. But evolution is one of the issues that he devotes a chapter to. And in that chapter, he goes through the theory of evolution as much as it is known to our time, and the proofs that support it, and the reasons why scientists largely have accepted that as the going theory in science. And that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, he shows that the Quran actually is quite compatible with that presentation from the scientific world. So here too we see a congruence of ideas and the Muslim acceptance of the theory of evolution, with the stipulation that it is God who creates. It's not that there is some blind mechanistic force that brings about life on earth.
Was there anything in Understanding the Quran, that book, in comparison to the other one that you reviewed, The Origins of Man, that sort of really sparked your interest a bit further in something new that you didn't find in the other book?
Well, in Dr. Mustafa Mahmoud's book, there is a lesser treatment of the subject, so it's more condensed. I found that he has some hesitation in staking a claim. Okay, well, this is what we believe in. He puts it in such a way that you will conclude as a reader that that is his belief. He can see that the theory of evolution is compatible, and not only compatible, but that is the reality that we have to deal with. But he puts it in a cautious way, and perhaps because he's writing in a different part of the world where one has to be cautious in how one says things, because the next thing you know, people could be rioting against you.
Yeah.
so that's something that I noticed. Well, in a way, I noticed that in Dr. Bucaille's book as well, but not from that same point of view of caution, but from a different point of view, in that Dr. Bucaille puts everything in a very academic style and with all kinds of cautions and nuances and so on. So that will be a piece of writing that will be inaccessible to the average person on the pew, but would be highly acclaimed by academics. And I appreciate that style as well.
So, taking into context both of the books that you've read on this subject, what is your personal conclusion based on Muslims' understanding of evolution?
Well, both of these books highlight certain passages of the Quran which are important to think about in this field. One is a verse from the 71st chapter, which says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقَكُمْ أَطْوَارًا, and God has created you in stages. So one might have thought that refers to stages within the womb of the mother, but now we can see more generally that humankind is created actually in stages and wave of successive hominids. And
so it's possible that verse could have referred to the idea of evolution as well.
Exactly. And in the 7th chapter, God said He created humankind and then shaped them. So as if these are two separate actions. So خَلَقْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ. We created you and then we shaped you. So as if there's an initial creation and then there's a further development and molding and shaping, which is basically what the theory of evolution actually holds. More generally, the Quran says that all things are created, all living things are created from water, and the watery or aquatic origins of life is one of the hallmarks of the theory of evolution. So that there is much more to be understood than the simplistic way in which some people might have discounted the theory of evolution, which obviously we'll have to look at in more depth as well to see what are their arguments, the arguments of those
from
who
the
reject,
other side,
and why do they reject, and what's the answer to their specific objections. But that simplistic view goes away in view of a detailed study and a careful examination of what the Quran actually says.
Well, I think even our discussion on scientist perspective and Christianity, it's very clear that it's not such a black and white issue as it was made out to be back in the day.
True.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shabir.
Hey YouTube, we hope you benefited from this video. If you liked it, or if you didn't, let us know in the comments below. And if you're interested in learning more, check out some of our other videos. And don't forget to subscribe so you can get new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday.